Is recording? It is. Let's see. Green. It's on. It's on. Okay, hi. Hi, everyone. I hope you had a good 3-day weekend. I don't really know, what a 3-day weekend tells us or means to us anymore because, I'm going to move my head up here because it always feels weird to talk to myself down at the bottom there. And Chrome Loom, oh, my hair looks bad. I should have fixed it before. Loom only works on Chrome, but I typically don't use Chrome, I use Firefox. So here I have all of our information here. So I wanted to start class with some news or like announcements. Okay, so here is the situation we have. So today is May 26th. I know, I can't believe that we have made it this far. It's May 26th. This is week 11 of distance learning. Our semesters are 12 weeks long. So next week is really our last week in class. So, oh shoot, I'm showing people each other's grades. Oh, look at those. So here's the situation with grades. So somebody had a question today between extra credit and makeup work. So if you're, in Blackboard, let me go back to the home page. Under the announcements here, let's go. More announcements. Let's look at all the announcements. Blah, blah, blah. That was today's thing. Let me get back to them. Oh my God, last week in Loom was driving me crazy. Extra credit, extra credit. Here's some extra credit options outlined. Okay, so nobody has to do any extra credit. Extra credit is extra. I know you guys are completely overwhelmed with all of your different classes and how every faculty member seems to have a different online platform they're using and different ways that they're doing class. So extra credit is just there if you want and or need it. So say at the beginning of the semester when we transitioned online, you had a family member who was really sick and you missed reading and discussion post 1, 2, and 3, and you don't really feel like going back and doing them, you could do 3 extra credits and you could fill it in. The extra credit assignments need to be emailed to me because there's no way to submit them on the ePortfolio thingy here because this is just for reading and discussion posts, all right? So please, if you're going to do extra credit, just email it to me, all right? So you do not have to do extra credit. Extra credit is extra. Another thing is several of you said you were unable to get this book or the book that we're reading now because you either ordered it too late. In normal times, you would have been able to order it and get it in a day, but these are not normal times. So you ordered it and then you ordered it from a place that said, oh, now you will get your book June 15th, which isn't really going to help you at this point. So I said, look, we have 3 posts. Actually, it seems like we only have 2 posts on Parable of the Sower. So you could do 2. If you were not able to get the book and you're stressing out because how are you going to read it? And I can't find an online PDF because this book literally just came out this in 2020. Then you can do 2 extra credits and fill in the 2 zeros you would have for these 2 posts. So extra credit is just there as a way for you to fill in any blanks you have on your grade, okay? So don't stress. Don't do any extra work if you don't have to, because I know you have other classes that you're taking care of as well, and I understand that this is not your only class, and I do not take it personally. I mean, even less than normally. I understand that I'm one of many classes that you have to attend to at this time, that the semester is coming to an end, that you might be behind in another class because you've been reading Kindred, and now you need to catch up in that class. It's all a juggling act, and I don't take it personally. So do not do the extra credit unless you feel like you have to. Okay, so here is the announcement that I sent today about grades. So I am all caught up in the grading, or I was as of 1 o'clock this afternoon. If you've submitted something past that point, I haven't graded it yet. But as of the time that I sent this message, around 1, I was all caught up in the grading. I put all the grades in the grade book here. And what I also did is I filled in every blank missing grade with a 0. So a 0 calculates in as like an F, like you didn't do it. You can still do every assignment, all of them, only up until June 8th, though, at 10 a.m. So June 8th at 10 a.m., I'm shutting all the shit down. It is done. And I'm going to start a massive grading and calculate your final grade. Make sure you understand what it is so that I can then discuss with you whether or not you should switch it to credit, no credit, right? In time. Our grades are due Tuesday, June 16th, but I am going to submit them that weekend. So your work is all due Monday, June 8th. Okay. It includes the extra credit, any reading and discussion posts that you are making up, plus extra credit if you are doing it. Again, you do not have to. I will be grading the 8th and 9th and 10th, putting everything into Blackboard here in the grading center, and then you'll be able to see the calculation of your grade. Remember, I grade on a 4.0 scale. I grade with letter grades that are converted to a 4.0 scale. So this is what I said in this email that I want to clarify with you, that if you look at your grade right now in the grading center, that's right here, you go to your grade and you see that you have like a 1.1, which is like a D. And you're like, you know what, man? I'm fine with that. I passed the class. I have to get my ish together for my sociology class or for my capstone class. Like, I don't have any more time to devote to Ungama. I'm just going to take the D. I'm going to convert it to credit. And I'm just going to like go on with my life. Go for it. Again, you need to take care of yourself. And I am not taking it personally. Even if you have been my A student in the past, if this has just been your personal semester from hell and you just are surviving at this point, there are more important things in life than English 214. And I am not judging you in the least. I appreciate those of you who have been able to stay on top of the work because I've just really enjoyed reading your work. Some of you have just done magnificent analysis and like thinking about the text that we've been reading. And I think some of you actually enjoyed the text we've been reading, which just makes my heart all warm and fuzzy. But for those of you who are really having a hard time with like home situations, mental health, sickness, please, like, don't worry about English 214. Worry about yourself. You are more important than this class. So if getting a D and converting it to credit is your strategy for survival at this point, so be it. Do it. So look at your grade. So if you have look at your grade. So if you look at your grade, it has all of your assignments from every week. And then at the end, it has your average. I can't pull it up right now because it would show everybody's grade. And I don't have consent from all of you who, I can't just show one student's grade at a time. But if you scroll to the end of the page, like you go, it'll be like the student's name, and there'll be like reading discussion post 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then it has your average here. Your average is on a 4.0 scale. So if you have like a 0.97, I'm going to round you up to a 1.0, which is a D, which means you pass the class. You can convert your D to credit, and you can move on with your life. And no one will ever know you got a D. They'll just know you got credit for the class. You could have gotten a C. You could have gotten a B, but you had an A average previously, and you didn't want the B to mess up your average. So none of their business, right? That's why CUNY did that this semester. So please, if you are confused or you're unsure, I'm so hot, my bedroom's so hot. If you're unsure what you should do, call me, or sorry, text me, and I will either call you and talk to you, or I'll set up a one-on-one Zoom, and we can talk it out. And I will advise you as like not only your faculty member, but as like your like an advisor for like your future degree that you're transferring into. So some of you are transferring into a 4-year school, then nobody's going to judge you for taking a credit for this class. And I think there's only like 3 or 4 of you that are considering studying English literature after this. So this is just an elective. So just focus your efforts on passing all of your classes. All right. That is what is most important. It is not most important for you to get an A or B with me. It is most important for you to pass all of your classes. All right. So please, please, please reach out. I am here to talk to you and to talk to you about all of this. Okay. So, if you are confused, here's the academic calendar for Gutman. Believe it or not, they already have the academic calendar for spring of 2021. When did we get so organized? Okay, so this is June. So June 1st, last day to apply for graduation. I know some of you are graduating right now, so yay. Let's ignore this. Okay, so blah, 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 blah. Okay, Saturday the 6th. So that is the first day to file for university credit, no credit policy option if I've submitted your grades. I'm not going to submit your grades by June 6th because your due date for all of your work isn't until June 8th, okay? So this is what's going to happen from what the registrar told faculty at a meeting last week. I'm going to put your grade into CUNY first. So I'm going to put like a C. And then you're going to have an option to convert that C to a credit if you don't want a C to go into your grade point average, or to leave it as a C. Sorry, my screen is so dirty. All right. But once you convert it, you can't change it back. You can't change your mind. So once I submit your grades, you have the availability in CUNY First to file for a credit, no credit within CUNY First. Monday, our classes end. Then we have final exams. We are not having a final in this class. I may give you like a little reflection piece to do if you want a little extra credit to bolster up your grade. But, you know, some of you have really high A's at this point. So I would definitely appreciate any feedback you can give on how this class ran. As you know, faculty too, we had to change our classes to distance learning within 4 days. So in the back of my mind, I have all these ideas about how I would do this differently if I had to do it again. But I would like to hear from you because I trust you guys and I trust you to be honest with me about what worked and didn't work and all of that. So you can always just give me some feedback. I welcome it. Last date. Grades are due. Oh, that's interesting. I thought having my calendar they would do the 16th, but I guess they're due the 15th. Well, I'm going to submit them that weekend. So I want to be done by Friday. I would love to submit my grades on Friday. Then you can go in and change credit, no credit, and we can be like, woo, done. We did it. We survived. All right. So that is the plan. If you don't understand what I'm saying, you need to reach out and talk to me. All right. I am here. I am here for you. Please, 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 please don't feel like you're alone out there. Like reach out and let me know that you're confused. Okay. And don't feel stupid if you're confused. This is confusing. It's not you. All right. So let's talk about class today. I didn't do a PowerPoint because you know what I realized? Sorry. According to the syllabus, we weren't going to have class today, but then I didn't look at my own syllabus. Wah, wah, professor fail. And the way I was planning it out in my head was we would talk about parable last week, the first third, this week, the middle third, and next week, the last third of the book. So I couldn't skip this week because we're going to talk about 2/3 of the book in 1 week. That's just too much. So today's going to be like quick and dirty, very fast lecture, just kind of covering a few important things that happen in this middle third of the book. So your homework was to read from page, I have it all, this book is really hard to lay flat. So I have a clip and then I have this giant piece of rock that I brought back from Alaska. Isn't it beautiful? That I hold the book down with. Can you see that? Can you see how I'm holding the book down? Let's see. There you go. Oh, yeah, there we go. Because the book doesn't lay flat and it drives me bananas. All right, let me put my rock over here. So you were supposed to read from page 181 until page 179, okay? So when we open in page 181, I don't understand why people have to put those mufflers or whatever it is on their cars. People who have very low self-esteem. I feel like they have to drive around with those things on. Okay, so we open on page 81. It's 2 years later. So remember, the book started in 2024. And when the first section of the book ends, like, Lauren is kind of like sitting in this discomfort of the community in which she lives. She lives in that walled community with her father and her big family and a small neighborhood. But she just wasn't feeling like it was safe anymore. And she was trying to explain that to her dad. And her dad's just like, stop like talking smack. You're going to freak people out. You're going to make them nervous and antsy. And that's when people get afraid. It's when they start acting stupid, which we kind of know is true. They're kind of both right here, which is the problem. She's right in that the safety isn't going to last forever, because nothing like that lasts forever. And he's right in that if you start talking like go bags and planning to run, and you're just going to make everybody really squirrely. And when people are squirrely and jumpy, they just do stupid shit, like shoot their neighbors on accident, or just they make rash decisions, right? All right, so I wanted to apologize because actually the Olamina family is larger than I thought. And some of you guys brought this up in reading a graphic novel. I loved those of you and what you wrote about the experience of reading a graphic novel. So interesting to me that I missed in that first third of the book that there's 2 little brothers too. So there's the Reverend Olamina, that's Lauren's dad. There's Corey, who is her stepmom, because remember, her biological mother was a drug addict who died in childbirth, which is why Lauren has hyperempathy syndrome, right? Then she has brothers Keith, Marcus, Gregory, and Bennett. So Keith is the oldest one, then Marcus, and Gregory and Bennett are like the babies, right? I totally forgot about Gregory and Bennett. There's just too many brothers. I got them confused in my last lecture, so I apologize for not being the all-knowing professor. I'm obviously not. All right, so the brother Keith has left Robledo, remember, and really pissed off Lauren's dad because he was defying his direct advice and rules that outside the wall is too dangerous to live. And he just feels like the man, he has made it out there. So this section opens when Keith is coming back, and he's a big 14-year-old, like a big guy. So he's able to pass off as older. But he's living outside. He says he's using his reading and writing skills to make money because not everybody gets to go to school now. This is part of the dystopian setting that education is a commodity and only certain people can afford to be educated, and or only certain people have time to be educated, and or only certain people have parents who were educated enough to educate their own children. So it's a rare thing to be able to read and write already. Which is, kind of a terrifying idea in my opinion, especially as someone who reads and writes for a living. But how quickly, if the education system collapsed, how quickly we would go to an illiterate society, right? So when he explains to Lauren, she starts to ask him, well, how did you know what to do? What happened when you got out there? And he explains to her how he transitioned to the outside world through stealing and murder. And she's just like, oh my God, you were just such a bad person. How would you do that? And it's this idea of kind of kill or be killed that he immediately bought into and transitioned to living within, which she does not respect at all. And then, no shock, with high risk comes, or high reward, all the money he was making comes high risk. And he is murdered and it comes up on page 89 very gruesomely. And the dad, which I actually think is interesting, because after the dad was poo-pooing Lauren for kind of speaking the truth about the fragility of safety, the dad very honestly tells the children how Keith was murdered. He says, this is on page 89, Dad said he tried to keep Corey from seeing it. Someone had endless hatred for my brother. He got us all together and described what had been done to Keith. They took off his skin. This is the dad speaking. Can you see this is his pane right here. Or this is called a pane in the comic strip, like a window. All right, look at their little faces. They're like, OMG, right? So he says, they took off his skin everywhere except his face. They burned out his eyes but left the rest intact. They cut and cauterized and cut and cauterized. He wanted to scare us. He wanted us to understand just how dangerous it is outside. Some of his wounds were days old. The police said drug dealers torture people that way. So he wasn't killed quickly. He was killed through like methodical torture. And if you cauterize something, it means you burn it back together. So if you have a cut, you kind of burn it to keep it from bleeding. So they would do that. They cut him and they burn it to seal it. And then they cut him again and they burn it to seal it. So he was tortured until death. And Reverend Olamina says this to scare the kids, the remaining kids, so that no one, again, will be tempted to go outside the wall. All right. So that happens. Another thing that comes up, and this is a really big part of the novel, although it's kind of glossed over and there's not a lot of time spent on it here in the graphic novel, is the creation of the town called Olivar. All right, so this is on page 93. So you see this one where it's like, don't go to Olivar. So Olivar is a city controlled by a corporation. So think of like Amazon, which is kind of like our equivalent of an Olivar in some way. If buying a failing city, buildings, a bunch of buildings in it, putting a wall around it, putting security around it so that you're safe, but you have to work for them. And then out of your wages comes like your rent, and then the grocery stores there are owned by them too. So you go to the grocery store and, you know, you buy what you need and you start to accumulate this like kind of tab with them, like a line of credit, but you're always spending more than you're making. So they end up owning you because you're so in so much debt to the company. Oh my gosh, there's a car alarm going off. It's so loud outside, but I have to keep my windows open because my room is so hot right now. So Oliver is a concept that comes up in a lot of science fiction, a lot of dystopian writing about debt slavery. Like slavery not existing in the way that it existed in Kindred, but you being enslaved by a company because you owe them more money than you make by working for them. So a lot of people, because they're starting to get a little nervous about life and they don't have a lot of ways to make money, are considering selling out and going to Oliver. But the Reverend is like, no, we are not doing that. Like, your freedom is still more valuable than this like sense of security. All right. And he says here, which I think is really interesting about this kind of dystopian America. This is on page 95. Sorry, I just keep holding things up to the camera here. This panel. I have my little star here. When they're talking about Oliver, he says, well, why shouldn't other countries buy up what's left of America if we put it up for sale? That's scary. So, you know, if America has collapsed, like what happens next, right? You know, so Corey at this time is considering, she's like, why don't we go to Olivar? Like, she's a nurse. Like, I could go be a nurse there and like we could have safety. And he's like, no. So they're having a little marital dispute about this. All right. So Lauren is still percolating. She's 17 now. So she's just kind of planning her exit. She's going to leave. But then her dad goes missing and they never find him. And he's presumed dead. They have a service. But without bodily proof of his death, his life insurance won't pay for 7 years, which puts the family, which is now Corey, the mom, plus 4 kids, in a very dangerous like economic situation. Like, they cannot eat. They don't have any money. They have no way of making money. Then there's a fire in the neighborhood, And while the fire is set to one house, robbers break in and rob everything out of Lauren's house. So this is just like this downward spiral that is happening. And, when Lauren is talking to Joanna's family went to Olivar, and Joanna's like, remember when you said that people were going to climb the wall? And like, oh, it was so stupid. And Lauren's like, just kind of swallowing her pride and like eating it. People aren't climbing the wall yet, but things are unraveling. Like Keith died, her dad died. Like this company is kind of like plucking people out of their community that, if a community loses enough people, won't be able to really hold itself together. And then there's this fire. So the community is largely compromised. And then 1 year later, what Lauren predicted would happen happens. Some of the people who are addicted to the drug that makes you want to set things on fire, they break into Robledo, they burn the whole place down, they murder everyone. Lauren escapes. After the chaos has kind of died down, she goes back in to scavenge out her own home, pretending that she's a stranger. She's able to get a few things. She doesn't know at this point what happened with Corey and the boys. They were running ahead of her, and she, because of her hyper empathy, she fell to the ground because she saw somebody get shot, so she felt the pain, and she lost them. She gets out, she hides, she comes back, and she's able to scavenge a few things from her own home and secretly, under the guise of looking like she's picking up lemons, dig up the stash of money that her family had under the lemon tree. And then she finds two of her neighbors who survived as well, Harry Balter and Zara Moss. And Zara had seen Corey and all three of the boys be murdered. So at this point, Lauren has lost her dad, her four brothers, and her stepmom, and she's the only survivor. So at this point, Lauren had her go back. She's just like, hey, now I'm going north. So Lauren decides to head up north. They decide to all travel together. It is mentioned that Zara is a woman of color and Harry is white and Lauren, of course, is black. So Lauren shaves off her hair and poses as a man because she's really tall, because women are not as safe on the road. So she poses as a man with Zara as her partner. So there's not an interracial couple, because that, I guess, is mentioned that it makes some people angry. And Harry is posing as their friend. All right, so excuse me. As they start to travel, we are exposed to the world outside of the walled community and what is actually happening there. So we see hold on. Let me find a picture. We see the panels that show the tons and tons of like highway walkers, how people are all just like walking north trying to find better opportunities because there's nothing left for them there, of all races and ages. We learn about different survival tips, about not building a campfire because it attracts people, or not eating, she says, while walking because it makes you a target because people want your food. Zara, who had a drug addict prostitute mom, who grew up on the streets, tells him the trick of sucking on a pit of a plum or an apricot to kind of keep your hunger at bay. And also, so they talk about survival tips, highway walkers, the nonstop violence against other travelers, and these issues of trust, that you can't trust anyone on the street. She has to reveal to Zara and Harry that she has hyper empathy because when they're attacked by men and she hits one man on the head and he's suffering, she has to kill him to stop his suffering because she can't continue to feel it. So she has to reveal to them that she has this condition which makes her vulnerable, and she cannot tolerate like leaving someone suffering. And if it comes to that, she will kill them so she won't have to suffer. We see the structure of these large, like but she talks about these large like department stores. This is on page 140, 145, where you can kind of go in. It sounds like a giant Costco or something and get everything that you need. Also water stations, which sounds, if water is a very rare commodity that most people don't have access to, how you have to buy water. So the water station is, do you see this joke here? It says sponsored by Nestle, which is the Nestle. Nestle is a horrible, horrible, horrible company that also makes like a lot of bottled water and such. So we learn about water stations and how dangerous they are. I thought this image was fascinating. This one about with the water in the bottles up here and how you have to pay to access it and refill your own bottles. Water stations, mega stores, constantly being on the defense against other travelers, against packs of dogs. They finally see the ocean for the first time, which sounds majestic. I mean, the Pacific Ocean is just truly beautiful. It's a whole different shade of blue, kind of like a dark blue, like this blue, as opposed to the Atlantic, which is more like a green-gray blue mixture, although I do love the Atlantic too. It has to deal with issues of sex and partnership, and then largely the biggest issue they have to deal with is trust. Like, how do you establish trust? At a certain point, Lauren, Harry, and Zara adopt kind of another family into their circle, a husband, a wife, and a kid. And because she says if there's a bigger group, they're less likely to be messed with. But with that comes all of their issues and trust, and they have a baby too. So that's about where we stand. So I think that, the next parts of the book really are going to be, like, where do they go from here? Like, what happens? Do they find a place? Do they settle down? Do they bring other people into their group? Like, do they survive? Do they all survive? Do some survive? Who do you think would actually survive of this, group of 5 and a baby that they have right now? Every time I feel like they add a baby into a survival narrative, like in The Walking Dead, when Lori, Rick's wife, named Lori, has that baby. I mean, she dies in childbirth, but then they have this newborn. Newborns can't be quiet. And I was like, oh, baby. Baby is just such a vulnerability. It just makes the whole group like weaker. But then they're so cute. She's a little baby. So I wanted to also, I brought this up earlier, but thank you guys for your candid feedback on reading a graphic novel. It sounds like some of you are enjoying it, even if it's kind of like a little confusing at the first about like, what do you read first? Do you read like the white circles, which is dialogue, or do you read the little things that look like a piece of like notebook paper, which is the kind of like background narration setting, like what's happening? Do you read the side panels, which often are pieces of Earthseed that Lauren is introducing us to? And I loved how some of you explained how you were figuring it out, how you started reading it one way and then you were like, what? And then you went back and reread it a different way and you're like, oh, okay, that's how it goes. I really wish we had time together to talk about it, because I think that would be really fascinating for me as someone who teaches, English and reading and writing, to see like how your brains are wrapping around it. And then I'm sure for some of you who've read like comic books and such, your lives, this is just like easy peasy because you know how to read panels and multiple layers of text and how to read it and when to read it. If you would like to know more about the making of a graphic novel or the translation of a prose novel into a graphic novel, there is a great video which I have posted in our YouTube channel under the Parable resources, in which the authors who translated Parable of the Sower, and they're doing the second book too, Parable of Talents, the illustrator John Jennings and the writer Damian Duffy, and then they were actually consulted by Tanana Redu. I think she's got a lot of nanas in there. I should look it up before I say that. She just seems like she's like my favorite quarantine person, because she's just seems like really legit and real and down to earth. And I'm completely like academic crushing on her. So generous with her knowledge and very kind. And so I'm happy that I discovered her last semester for our horror class, because now she's just kind of seamlessly weaving her way through my academic year. She consulted them on the translation. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll find this under that's Tanana Reeve. I spelled it right. That's her, and she is interviewing these two guys. Let's watch a few minutes of it, just for fun.
Kindred graphic novel, which won, I believe, a Bram Stoker Award and a bunch of other awards. So congratulations on that. I would love to hear about your experience with Parable of the Sower, the reception, and also then let's move into the creation and some of the difficulties, because it's such a violent story. Also, Kindred was a very violent story. Yeah. So how do you, and I found in both cases, even though I had read both prose versions first, that there's something so visceral about having those images in your face. So I'm just going to like dole out a whole bunch of little prompts and you all jump in however you see fit.
Okay. So, David, do you want to talk about the generation of the Parable books? Just want to start there.
Yeah, like deciding to adapt those, or
yeah. Just start.
Yeah. So we, as Tanana was saying, we had a good deal of success with Kindred, and everybody was happy. So the publisher asked us what we'd like to do next, and that was in 2017. So right after the presidential election, and so it was pretty clear even then that we were headed towards basically the reality that the Parable books were about.
Right.
And it seemed like really important, an important time to adapt them. Mm-hmm. Just because, a part of the thinking of making graphic novel adaptation is to make them more accessible or like find new audiences for the work. And, if ever there was a time where people needed this book, it would be now. Not that I knew there was a pandemic coming, but, just the sort of
just convenient
general malignancy of late capitalism and all the issues surrounding climate change and sort of tribalism, just everything that both books are about, and especially the first one with climate change. So, and then the other reason I was very adamant about adapting Parable of Sower next is, I would say Kindred is the first novel I read in a single sitting, because I read slow, so usually it'll take me a few days. But so that was the first one I read in a single sitting. Parable of Sower is the first novel I had to put down because it scared me. Because, it's real. It was like a little too real. And this was years before Adapt.
That is a great question. Maybe I'll put it in your reading and discussion post. Have you ever read a book that you had to put down because it actually scared you? That's a good question. I'm going to ask you that, so think about it.
Adapting or anything, but I remember that was the first time where I was like, I needed to take a step back. So that sort of was like a challenge that spurred me on also. And then, John, what's your experience with Parable of the Sower?
When they asked us what the next books would be, we had a short list. There are other things that we were looking at, but for the very same reasons. First of all, we wanted to do both books. We felt like both should be done. After the elections, and I think I want to say it was a Parable of the Sower was something I read later on. My first experience with Octavia's work was Wild Seed, and still my favorite standalone story. As far as I know it's connected to the rest of the series, but I just love that book. So of course I was very excited to try to do Wild Seed, but it's almost like Parable reads as like a how-to manual, or it has these types of very useful passages for living, and so we were like, we actually kind of owe it to the audience to even put this out. So that's kind of what we decided to do. And
I think I've told you this before, or it came up in a different lecture at a different time. But when this whole pandemic started, one of the things that I read was a piece about literature and how you either read towards your fears or you read like to distract yourself from your fears. And, I have always loved dystopian literature and horror literature and futuristic literature, science fiction, all of that stuff, and horror movies and science fiction movies. I just started watching The Matrix with my kids last night, which is like my version of the Bible. I've always been one to like kind of run head on into my fears because it's my way of control. Like, so how he says this is kind of like a how-to survival guide, which I also read those as well. That's one of the reasons I'm attracted to this work. And I think that's one of the reasons other people have a real hard like gag reflex towards work like this, is they're just like, oh, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to, like, almost like ignorance is bliss. Like, I'd rather not spend my hours of my days like figuring out what to put in my go bag or how I would survive outside of this, that, or the other thing, or what I would do if the ultimate horrible thing happened. That is the ultimate horrible thing I'm afraid of, which is different for each of us. So I think that's like a really interesting thing about this text. And if you really do like this text as a graphic novel and you have time this summer, you should pick up the novel, because one of the sad things about a graphic novel is it cannot go as in depth. It's a much lower reading level because there's not as many words. And the words have to be very chosen. So it's easier to read and faster to read, which makes it more accessible, like Damien said. But it also, you sacrifice a lot of the text because instead you replace it with the images, which a lot of you say you're really enjoying. And one of the things you miss about being in class is kind of like, you say a lot of, I would say almost 90% of you have said since we've moved online, like, I'm not learning as well because I'm a visual learner. I'm like, well, you're still getting visuals. It's just all on this stupid little screen right here. But what you really mean is like, it's not visual as much as like you're an interactive learner. Like you like the volleying back and forth between like the professor and the students and the students and the students and the like laughing in class and the like hearing other people's ideas and all that. So for those of you who are claiming you're visual learners, which I don't doubt because you're a visual generation, you're saying that the images are really exciting to you. It's almost like you can have this like interactive experience with the image that you can't have with just like a text-based novel, which is fascinating to me. Like really, really interesting stuff. There's a lot more of this. As you can see, it goes on forever. If you scroll, you can, if you're really interested in how they made the novel, like he talks about, text selection, and then the other guy, he talks about, whatchamacallit, how they conceived of what Lauren looks like, and different things they did to her. Like they gave her a mole, so you can always tell which one's Lauren when she changes from being a woman with the long locks to shaving her head and trying to look like a man. How you can tell it's always her because she has a mole. How they made the images really kind of gritty and violent because it's a really violent story, and they chose certain colors based on the landscapes of California. So if you're interested in the arts or graphic design or something like that, which I know some of you are because I've talked to you, you should go through and watch this lecture. And like you can go through when these two guys are talking, and then Stephen Barnes, who's Tanana Reeves' dude's husband, like his Wakanda background there. He talks about kind of like the writing process for those of you who are interested in writing. And it's a really, really long class webinar of these individuals talking with each other.
But I think that
so it's just interesting if you want to know more. All right. So I think that's it. You still can do all of these reading and discussion posts. You can still do all of the extra credit. Please read over this grades, info, due date, etc. I always work better when I have a due date because I'm a procrastinator. So I'm hoping that by giving you guys a hard due date, like June 8th, 10 a.m., that it'll light a fire under some of your butts. And like, for those of you who've been kind of procrastinating, like getting me some things, that you will go ahead and feel motivated to get a couple more things in. And for those of you who look at your grade and you decide, you know what? I'm cool with that. I need to like work on like my sociology class or my capstone. That is great too. You are an educated adult who can make decisions. And if your decision is like, I'm just trying to make it through this semester, please do that. And don't feel bad about it. Like seriously, you really don't need to like be hating on yourself that way this semester. Like, some of you have had a really some of you I've taught before, and I know you're A students and you're really struggling this semester and you're not getting A's. It's okay. It's okay. You're going to be fine. It's going to be okay. So please just let go of that, like self-flagellation where you're like, I have to get an A, like whipping yourself on the back. Like, I need an A. Like, just let it go. Really, just love on yourself a little bit and like, just make sure you're passing your classes. And for those of you who are getting A's, rock on with your bad self. Like, you're doing great. All right. Second to last lecture down and done. I will have office hour on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. On Zoom. I'll send you the invite. So please pop in if you just have any questions. If you don't want, nobody really comes ever, so you probably will have me all to yourself. I just kind of leave it open in the corner while I do work because nobody's come for like 4 weeks now, 5 weeks. I've talked with probably like 4 or 5 of you individually outside of the office hours, but nobody really comes to them. So if you would prefer to just set up a one-on-one Zoom with me, I've got time. I'm here for you, so let me know. Mwah. You're almost done. You have almost finished the semester. So just crank out the last couple of weeks here. Okay.